Hey everyone, this is Jamie Joe Wright coming to you from Mad Lit Musings, and I am super excited today. We have Bob Smiley with us. Welcome, Mr. Smiley.
Thanks for having me on.
I
One of the best parts about being a comedian is the hardest part of my job today was just getting my AirPods out of the charger and putting them on, and then I'm pretty much done for the day. So,
yeah, it's rough. It's rough. But yeah, you are a comedian. You are well, I'm reading on the back of the book we're going to talk about. Bob Smiley, aka Average Boy, is a comedian and the star of a long-running humor column in Focus on the Family Clubhouse magazine. I'm sure that summarizes your entire life in one sentence.
well, there was a couple things in the third grade that happened that was
Yeah.
interesting, but it was a it's a short book, so we didn't want to take up the whole
Okay.
back cover with that.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
but
That's true.
other than that, that sums up my life completely.
That's great. That's great. But we're open for exposés here. So if you want to share a third grade story, I mean, feel free at any time to pop that into the conversation. We'll take it.
Okay, I'm going to need a minute to look up what the word expose means,
Okay.
but once I get that done, then I'm happy to give one or do one, or
All right. That's
I'm
perfect.
still not to the definition yet, but I'll get
Yeah,
there.
that's all right. It takes a while to get through a dictionary. So we'll give you a few minutes and then we'll come back. So no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, is it? I'm looking in X and it's
It's
not
not
showing
there.
up.
It's not showing
Yeah.
up. All right. Well, we don't need to tell you what an expose is. We'll just go for it. So
Okay.
anyway, it's great to have you here. You are a writer and a comedian, and I'm excited because we need books like this out in the world. And so I was excited. My son is 11 and he saw it come through the mail and he goes, Is that for me? And I'm like, Actually, no, it's mine.
My favorite story. So that's the fourth book in the series, and when the first one came out, the first two were so average boy, grows up in a small town, and he
Yeah.
has a best friend and all that. So they're the same characters, but the first two books were individual. Each chapter was an individual funny story with stuff that middle school kids do, and deal with, and
Right.
and stuff like peer pressure and picking the right friends and all that. And so we put devotion questions at the end of each chapter,
Okay.
so that kids could have things to think through about each chapter, that just to get them to thinking. And my favorite story about the first book coming out was, I was performing at a festival and the book had
Mhm.
just come out, so I had it in my merch table, and this 71-year-old lady came to my table, bought the book for her grandson, and it was a 2-day festival. And we talked about her grandson for a while. She's the sweetest lady.
Yeah.
She came back the next day and she bought another copy. And I said, well, I'm glad to sell another book, but I know you only have one grandson. And she said that she went back to her hotel and she started reading it, and she got so wrapped up in it, she forgot and started answering the questions
No
at the
way.
bottom of the chapter. So when people ask me, like, what age group is my book
That's
for,
awesome.
really 7 to 71
That's perfect.
seems to be the demographic. So
Yeah.
yeah, I hope you enjoy it and then maybe pass it down to your kid.
Yeah, I might. I don't know. I might just take notes and, dog ear the pages and put the tabs in there and all that stuff. So, but it's great. It's great. I love it. And but it's kind of funny because I'm an author myself and I have a lot of people, especially parents, going, is there Christian fiction out there for our kids? Is there stuff for them to read? Because we look for it and we can't find it. And I love going to Focus on the Family, obviously, is a first and foremost place to go. But these books are so cool for boys. Not that girls don't enjoy them, but they are geared
Yeah.
toward the guy, right?
Actually, no. The
Okay.
first book that we put out was pretty much geared toward. It was basically about Average Boy and his best friend
Okay.
Billy, and
Okay.
all that. But there was a few girl characters, and then when the first book came out, we actually got a lot of feedback from middle school girls saying, "Hey, we really love the Average Boy series, but how come he doesn't hang out with more girls, or how come there's not more,
So,
girl characters and stuff?"
yeah.
And so we went back and I actually rewrote, and we added 5 new chapters to the first book
Okay.
on the, I think, third edition that came out.
Yeah.
And we added more characters. And now, so the first two books are comedy devotion books. So, like
Hmm.
I said, funny stories, but devotion. And then the other two, Average Boys Above Average Year, and the new one that you were held up, Average Boys Above Average Summer, are just chapter books. I always tell people it's kind of like Diary of a Wimpy Kid, only
Hmm.
way better.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope the author doesn't hear this and then we get
No.
into a,
I don't think I
fight
have
on
that far of
X.
a reach on my podcast to make it to his computer. So
Yeah, but yeah, we so now there are two main girl characters and two main boy characters
awesome.
in the series that show up quite a bit, and so
Yeah.
I'm very pleasantly surprised. One, what you said early on when Average Boy, because I was writing a monthly article in Clubhouse magazine, so that's
Okay.
all it was just a
Right.
funny article about this character, and it started getting a ton of fan mail from middle school kids, and so that's when Focus on the Family
Awesome.
was like, let's do a book and see if that works. And my I said the exact same thing. I was like, do kids still read books? Do they sit down? And I was so pleasantly surprised that they do. They
Yeah.
are eagerly looking for good things. And what parent doesn't want a tool, to
Right.
help them
Yeah.
keep their kids, because the world is competing for their time, their
Hmm.
eyes, like
Hmm.
everything. And so to have something good to put in their hands that makes them laugh, but also makes them think about, what God has planned for them
Right.
in their life. Yeah, it's been a wild ride. So when the fourth book came out, I just had that moment where I sat back and I was like, man, God's doing some great things.
It's so cool. It's so cool. My husband was a youth pastor for many years, and I worked with middle school. They're always my favorite age because they're just wild and unrehearsed, unfiltered. But at the same time, you say something to them, and they're like, oh, and you can have a super intelligent conversation, and they're not argumentative necessarily like an adult might be.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, let's have a conversation about this. And it's great. And so it's fun to have books like this that you can be like, hey, guys, there's some fun stuff out here to read, um, and be able to make points to them through entertainment. So I guess my question in all of that, because that wasn't really a question, it was more of a statement, was why do you think it's important for entertainment to be offered to middle schoolers through a godly lens? Why can't they just get entertainment elsewhere? Because it's entertainment.
Well, I guess the answer is they can, but you also need to be very, very careful about what is coming into your home and,
Mm,
specifically into your kids' eyes and
yeah,
hearts. So, sure, you can turn on the TV, but you don't really know, or you can hand them a cell phone and trust them. But like I said earlier, the outside world is competing.
hmm,
All the algorithms are on social media is set to really try to get young kids addicted to their platforms, and so they are competing for them. So to answer your question, I think it's important to get them, good entertainment that also has a godly perspective to help keep them on the right path. And so, if you can provide both, you can
yeah,
provide something that gets the kids entertaining and laughing, and a series that they enjoy following through, and they get to know the characters and stuff. Then they're invested in that. But then they're also getting, some good guidelines to life, hopefully, little takeaway,
hmm,
nuggets to
hmm,
to help hopefully, I guess, drown out some of that outside noise that's
yeah.
trying to get kids on the wrong path.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, and that's so true because my son was talking to me the other day. I'm the mom that let him get addicted to shorts, right? Which was not a good idea. And so
Yeah,
we're kind of doing the whole backtrack thing, like, yeah, here's a book, read this. But it's kind of funny, like some of the stuff that he'll come up and he'll be like, oh, this is really cool. And he'll crack a joke that he heard on a reel or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, maybe don't repeat that because there's innuendos and things they're not realizing or even built in to so much of the media that's out there right now. And
yeah,
it's such a danger, really, for the kids.
yeah. We used to have this is back in the day,
Yeah.
but a DVD player. If your listeners know what a DVD
Gosh,
was,
were those little silver round disc things? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
We had one of those, and it was called Clear Play, and it would
Hmm.
cut out the bad stuff of movies.
Sure.
And so my wife and I have five tax deductions, all boys, and so as my boys
Oh,
were growing
wow.
up, we watched Airplane, Blazing Saddles, all
Yep.
the great comedy
Yep.
shows. But it edited out everything bad. And then my oldest son Coulter was when he was in third grade. Uh, one of his teachers said, Shirley, you haven't finished your test. And he, of course, said, I have finished my test and don't call me Shirley. And the teacher paused and he goes, have you seen Airplane? And he goes, oh yeah, my dad and I watch it all the time. So I had to go back up to school and be like,
Right.
look, I promise I'm a good parent. I
Yes.
We have this thing that cuts out all the bad stuff.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's an example of like you can find ways to get your kids good entertainment without exposing them
Right.
to the bad stuff. And as far as the reels, my kids have gone through that.
Hmm.
And I actually just my youngest and I were kind of laughing because when this fourth book came out, I was like, hey, are you going to read it? Because he's in ninth grade, so he's
Okay.
almost a little bit too
Sure.
old, but
Sure.
um, and he was flipping through reels. And I was like, here, and I put the book in his hand. I was like, no, it's almost the same thing because you still get to flip, you still get to
Right.
swipe. It just takes you a little bit longer to swipe a page.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, I'm going to read it just because that joke was good.
Oh, that's good. That's nice that he gives you the complimentary read then with a good
Yeah.
joke. Yeah. Is that how you get
Yeah.
your kids to do things like you crack a joke and then they owe you?
Yeah. And my kids are all pretty
Yeah.
funny too.
Are they?
And that's a question I get about my stand up is like, do
Okay.
your kids think you're funny? And fortunately, my kids still think I'm really funny and they like to be the subject of the material. So,
Okay.
where I have a lot of comedy friends that their kids don't want them to talk about them and stuff, but my kids will be doing stuff and then come in and tell me about it and be like, is that good enough to
Is
go
that
on,
good? Yeah.
your show? And like, they kind of like the,
Yeah.
notoriety.
They like to be in the material that you're using. That's funny. That's
Hmm.
great. That's great. Oh man. Well, the fun thing with these books and then, even as we're talking about media with kids at this age is having characters that are relatable. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the average boy and his friends and what is it that you've crafted in these stories that kids will be able to relate to specifically, like with personalities and things like that.
Ooh, that's a great question. So Average Boy is basically me, uh, but as a modern day middle school kid, because the way it started
Okay.
was,
Yeah.
and again, man, I'm going to sound like a dinosaur on here, but when my first comedy CD came
Yeah.
out,
Hmm. I
Focus
think
on
I
the
bought
Family
it
got it.
actually.
Yeah, so you were one of the
Oh
four.
yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
So
I
my
think I was number
mom,
3. Yeah.
yeah, Focus on the Family, that guy from Goodwill. And then sadly, I was the fourth. But anyway, we'll
Okay.
move on.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so when my CD came out, they got it and they thought it was funny and they thought it would that kind of humor would translate to middle school kids. So they asked me to write one article in Clubhouse magazine. And one
Yeah.
of my bucket lists, even though I never wanted to be a comedian or wasn't a goal of mine when I
Hmm.
was young, I was reading all these humor articles in magazines and stuff. And so one of my bucket lists was to be printed, like have a humor article printed in a magazine. I thought it would only probably be one time, but that was one of my bucket list goals. And so when they
Sure.
asked me, I jumped on it.
Yeah.
And so I was writing it was a back to school issue. And so I thought of some jokes that were more modern, like with
Okay.
technology and stuff. So as I was writing this true story about me getting this bad haircut, going back to school, I thought, okay, well, it can't be me. I want to put these little technology jokes in there. And so I just created this character. So Average Boy, he's living in a small town.
Okay.
He wants to be good at everything, but he's very average at sports. He's very average at school. He just all around, he wants to be a superhero. He wants to be, the best basketball player, the
Yeah.
best at school, but he's just average. So he kind of realizes if he lives for God, he can actually be super average. So even though he's
Awesome.
he's not probably going to hit the game winning, free throw, if he can help somebody out in the lunchroom and encourage them by making them laugh when they're having a bad day, he
Hmm.
feels like a superhero because he's done something good. So
Yeah.
Average Boy, he's still a little mischiefy and he still gets in a lot of trouble and he a little mischief, but overall he's trying to put more good in the world than bad.
Okay.
So that's our main character. His best friend Billy
Hmm.
is his friend. He comes from a blended family, so sometimes he has trouble getting along with his siblings and stuff like that. But Billy and Average Boy are super loyal to each other. So
Mm.
as best friends, they are. Even when Average Boy is doing something completely dumb and embarrassing, Billy's going to jump in and
Yeah.
and be by his side and
Yeah.
stuff. There's a character named Sarah. who is actually based off my wife.
Oh, awesome.
She is very funny, very quick-witted,
Uh-huh.
and very smart. But she just likes Average Boy because, Average Boy adds a little bit of spark to her life because,
Hmm.
where she's going to class and taking notes and all that kind of stuff, she might look up and Average Boy's, trying to get a pencil to balance on the top of the clock in the room, or, just a little bit of joy,
Yeah.
brought in, a
Yeah.
little bit of mischief, to break up her very rule following way. But then Sarah also kind of acts as the voice of reason in a lot of
Okay.
situations where they're about to do something. And she's like,
Yeah.
hey, maybe not jump in that creek until you check to see how deep it is and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And then there's Everly. Everly is a very tomboyish girl, so it kind of breaks the stereotype of
Okay.
girls are icky and they're painting their nails all the time and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's awesome.
the way I introduced her character, she beat Billy and Average Boy in a frog catching contest. This is actually based on Everly is based on a friend of mine's daughter named
Okay.
Everly, and we were out at a summer camp a couple years ago, right before I introduced the character,
Okay.
and she actually was catching more frogs than all the other boys
I
at the
had a
camp.
girl.
And
I
so,
had a girl.
yeah. So those are the main
Yeah.
four characters, and so they're basically up for adventure, but they're always going to have each other's backs, and they're always going to try to not step out of bounds of what God really has designed for their life.
That's so cool. I love that. I love that. It's funny as you're describing the two boys, it reminds me of my son and his best friend because I mean, they are loyal to a fault. Like my son had to do nose and toes when he was a kid at
Oh
school
yeah,
because he climbed up the slide the wrong way, which is notorious. My son's always like, just, I'm going to do it differently and not realize I'm doing it differently. So he had to do
yeah.
nose and toes. So his friend went off and did the same thing. So he got in trouble. So he had to do nose and toes too. And I'm like, yes. That's the best. So I get the note,
Yep.
like, hey, your son had to do nose and toes because he climbed up the slide the wrong way. And I'm like, did his friend do it too? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, perfect. I'm a proud mom. So,
Oh, that's great.
oh, it's funny. But yeah, yeah. And and then also the girl who's really studious, that reminds me of my daughter because she's like the note taker and the
Mhm.
type A, and she has to have everything in columns. And my son's next to her, making the little origami frogs with post-it notes and popping them in the air while they're trying to do school. It's just great.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. But that's so cool because it sounds like you have a mixture of personalities in the book so that any kid that picks up the book can probably find one of the characters that they're going to relate to. I would have been the girl
Yeah.
catching frogs, wasn't I?
I kind of thought that, but I didn't want to just say that up front. But yeah, just
Yeah.
our brief conversation before we started recording, I was like, okay, this I could hang out with
She's a
this
frog
person.
catcher. She's a frog
Yeah, it's a
catcher.
frog
Yeah.
catcher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then another thing is then we have a lot of side characters. So there's a kid who is he comes from a very wealthy family.
Okay.
But a lot of times, so he's not caught up in all the material things. So Average Boy can kind of see that relationships is more important because
I
this
like
kid
that.
does have everything, but all he
Yeah.
wants to do is go hang out in the creek with Billy and Average Boy,
Yeah.
and stuff. And so
Yeah.
there's that, and then uh, Average Boy has a elderly man that lives across the woods from him,
Hmm.
and so Average Boy wants him to take him fishing all the time or hanging out and stuff. And so the elderly man acts like he really doesn't like Average Boy, but deep down he really kind of does, even though he acts like he's super annoyed by him. And so there's
Yeah.
definitely some running characters throughout. And then like in the third book, Average
Okay.
Boy's Above Average Summer, because bullying is such a big deal. Average Boy goes to
Yeah.
a new school and he has these three bullies that he calls the terrible threesome.
Okay.
And so they make quite a bit of an appearance in that book. And then the fourth one, the new one, Average Boys Above Average Summer.
Hmm.
But then also all through all the years that I've been writing Average Boy, his main big bully is a guy named Donnie.
Okay.
Who ironically was my bully when I was in
I was
school.
just gonna say, is this
Yeah,
personal experience?
it is. And I introduced him by writing about a fight that he and I got into. Now we were in high school, but Donnie is based on this character, and people are always like, "Aren't you worried he's going to find out?" And I'm like, Donnie doesn't know how to read. So I'm not worried
Not worried.
about him, yeah, reading this and then
Yeah,
tracking me down.
no.
But
Mm-mm.
yeah, so there's some bullies in
Yeah,
there, and how Average Boy has to deal with them,
yeah,
and but also deal with them kind of in a loving way, but not there's still accountability and
right.
not that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think there's enough stuff in the books that no matter what, you're going to relate to some parts of it. Every kid is going to relate to them. And I really have tried to create either the main characters or some of the side characters that are
Hmm.
involved so people, the kids can relate to somebody in the book.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And I love the fact that you have the older neighbor next door because that's like growing up. I spent so much time with older, elderly people. I mean, that was my environment growing up. And my kids are, they have a poppy who's that way. My son and my dad, they play chess all the time. My dad has early Alzheimer's, and it's just always neat to have those relationships. And I think kids at this age need to see that because those people are so pivotal in helping those relationships and that maturity grow within them. And seeing it normalized in a book all of a sudden makes them go, oh, maybe this person has value as an older.
Exactly right. The person that I'm talking about in the
Mhm.
book, his name is Mr. Palvido,
Okay.
and he is based off my great grandfather, whose name was Mr. Palvido.
Okay.
So I'm not good with coming up with different names,
So
but
your imagination just is just off
it's
the
it's
charts,
it's pretty
dude.
wild. It's pretty
It's
crazy,
wow.
but yeah, I wanted to give because he would take me fishing, and he was the fire chief of Austin, Texas, and so
Okay.
I would go up to the firehouse and play dominoes with all these retired firemen. And even in my comedy shows, I talk a lot about my grandparents and what a blessing they were to
Yeah.
my life. And I do a lot of shows for youth groups, and so I'll tell kids like, if you still have your grandparents, they are a blessing because they have
Yeah.
wisdom, they know how to love. And some kids are like, I don't want to talk to my grandparents. They say weird stuff, their mind is going. And I'm always like, that's the best time to talk to them,
Yes.
It's like channel surfing. You never
It
know what's
is.
on.
No,
So,
no. In
yeah.
fact, my kids are like, we're entering, and I probably shouldn't put this on a podcast, but my dad won't listen. So we're entering this stage of Alzheimer's where it's getting beyond the early and we're getting into the deeper. And the kids, it's emotional. There's no
Yeah.
question it's emotional. But I told the kids, I said, you can do one of two things. You can learn to laugh or you can learn to cry. I said, so when we go hang out with Poppy, let's find the things that we can laugh about. And it's so funny. It's turning into like every time we go over there, there's some sort of comedic element. And then my dad
Hmm.
like senses the comedic and then he starts playing it up. So now he's in this mode where we go over there and he goes, and you are now, I thought I had a grandkid, but I'm not sure who you are. And he starts playing it up knowing that it's there.
Yeah.
But it just bonds him with the kids even more and they just get excited to have that relationship. So,
Yeah, I actually lived with my great grandparents for 3.5 months
okay.
because my great grandmother had that, and so
Mm-hmm.
she was getting to the point where they really needed to move into a assisted living
Yeah.
place, but she wasn't ready, and so my great grandfather asked me if I would come and move in because I was kind of I was really close to her,
Mm-hmm.
and for 3.5 months, and my name's Bob, and she knew my name was Bob, and she knew I was her favorite, but she wasn't 100% sure. So to be safe, she called me Bub. And so, which I thought, okay, that's
Yes,
still firing pretty
it
pretty
is.
good to be
It
able to like,
is.
okay, I really think it's Bob, but I'm going to go with Bub.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
we just like we found ways to keep humor in,
Mhm.
the situation that was, could turn dark pretty
Yeah.
quickly and stuff,
Yeah.
and just lead with love and know that
Absolutely.
this is just where we're at in
Right.
in our timeline and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you guys are on the right track with that.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's not fun, but I mean, it's fun to be able to enjoy life in each stage. And I think, segueing, hey, watch this. This is really smooth. Back to your book.
Oh,
I know, right? That was good. It's
look at
fun
that
to show,
professionalism.
I'm not really great at this, but back to the book. It's great for kids to be able to see that there are going to be those darker moments. There are going to be bullies. There are going to be elderly people we have to spend time with, boring situations, but yet training them to find the good, the joy, the humor, the laughter. is so critical because it's been fun to see even with the situation with my dad, my kids go out now. Like when we first went to the assisted living, it was head down to the floor, get to Poppy's room, don't look around. And now the other day we walk in and my daughter saw this lady. I don't even know who she was. She got to be in her 90s. She's sitting in the chair. And my daughter leans out, she goes, "Your makeup is just on point today." And the lady just, grinned. And it's just so neat to see kids be able to take these types of principles and then start applying them in real life in whatever facet that they're involved in.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like everybody has something to give,
Yeah,
they have a story to tell. And so I think it's good to open, people's minds of like not to, like you said, have these blinders on, but to
right.
realize like everybody is important. If you have air in your
Hmm.
lung, you're important.
Hmm.
And so to be able to take in all of that, it really is a blessing. Like I said, I was very fortunate to have my great grandparents and my grandparents, and so I would hang out with all of their friends and just
Hmm.
hearing their stories of
Hmm.
the Great Depression and stuff like that. Now,
Yeah.
my great grandmother toward the end, did tell me my makeup was on point,
Did she?
but
Yeah.
and I didn't have makeup on, so there were some rough moments like that, but
Yeah.
for the most part,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah. But those are the emotional moments you can kind of lock away in the room and just not remember. But
Yeah,
I was going to
yeah.
mention your makeup today too, but I decided not to. Um,
I got
so
a little Peter Furler eyeliner on, but that's it. That's it.
that's great. That's great. Awesome. Oh man. Well, the book is called The Adventures of Average Boys Above Average Summer. It's by Bob Smiley and Jesse Floria. Am I pronouncing that right?
Mhm.
I
Sure.
I tried. Well, he's not here to defend himself, so
I was gonna say if he wants his name said right, he should have popped on.
I was going to ask him, but he didn't come. So you get what you get. So anyway, they're great books. They're available. They're published by Focus on the Family, and that's a division of Tyndale Fiction. And you can get them everywhere books are sold. And
Yep.
anything else we should know about this series before we bring it to a dramatic close?
Just that it's been a lot of fun because now I've been doing stand up for over 25 years,
Hmm.
and with the success of the last two books, really the third book, Average Boys Above Average Year, when it came out on Amazon, the first month it sold out.
Nice.
So for the next 3 months I couldn't even get my own book to sell at my shows and stuff, and so that one did well, and then this fourth one that just came out did the
Hmm.
same thing.
That's
It sold
great.
out on Amazon, hit number one.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that to brag. That's just a
No.
bonus
Hmm.
to it.
Hmm.
But so lately, in the last couple of years, I love that people are coming to my comedy shows and bringing their kids. And their
Mm.
kids have never seen me do stand up, but they're there because they're Average Boy fans.
That's so
And
cool.
so it's awesome to be able to connect with them and talk
Yep.
with them, and that parents are bringing their kids to to see
Hmm.
the guy who came up with the whole Average Boy stories and stuff. And the kids are always asking me like, okay, what part is from that was actually true from your childhood? And because most of the stories are all things that happened to me, but then every once
Yeah.
in a while it'll be something that happened to one of my kids.
Oh,
And I've
sure.
got
Yeah.
five comedy writers,
Right.
living
You
with me.
got
So
plenty of
yeah,
material.
so kids are actually getting that invested. They're like, okay, when he got stuck on the flagpole, was that something that happened to you or something that happened to one of your kids? And it's been a fun ride to be a part of,
Yeah.
just to see kids kind of come alive
Yeah.
with one reading again, and
Right.
then two just diving into these stories.
Right. Well, and if the listeners know anything about me, I'm always like, if you read it, leave reviews because that helps other people find them. Buy copies for your church library. Your kids,
Mhm.
like I see kids in our church library all the time and they're trying to find something interesting to read. These can be front and center. And if you have a Christian school, a private school, buy them for the libraries. I'm just huge on that. Ask them at your public schools, see if they'll get them in there too, because that's always a great thing. So, um,
Yeah, our public school, one, because I'm home during the week, I
yeah,
volunteer up there a
yeah,
lot. And so they kind of know me, but the librarian has my books in the public
it's
library
awesome.
because I'm one of the watchdog dads that come
Okay.
up and volunteer. So
Yeah,
I'm the author of it. And so that's how
right.
they got it in
Yeah,
for that. So
yeah,
yeah, you'd be surprised. Some public schools will
they
have,
will.
because it's good morals, and
Right.
kids need to be reminded that it's important to do the right thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Bob, thank you so much for coming, and tell Jesse thank you for not coming. I mean, tell
Yeah.
Jesse thank you for trying.
Oh, I will be heckling him quite a bit about this
Oh, this is
later
good.
on.
This is good. This will be great. But this was a blast. I appreciate having you on. And all the parents out there, definitely get your kids hooked up with these books because I think they're going to be super great and great Christmas presents. Just throwing that out there.
That's right. It's coming up.
Coming up. All right. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.